The 1974 slasher pick, a Canadian production, Black Christmas, is currently the subject of a book looking at its history and talking to some of the stars. Paul Downey joins me now to tell me more about it. Hello, sir.
Good morning.
What's going on with the book itself? Because this is reminiscing about a movie, which is, I think it's been remade. There are 3 in the series, and it is part of almost a franchise that has become very much a cult following sort of film.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, because initially the idea for the book was we were just going to focus on 1974 Bob Clark film. That obviously is fair. It's kind of cultish, but it's got quite a big following amongst the kind of the hardcore, shall we say, in terms of the horror genre. And it kind of morphed from there, because we found that there was legs in talking about the 2006 and 2019 remake. And at the time of writing it, initially it was the 1974 film we were focusing on, and then it was in 2019 when the latest film in the series, shall we say, was being released. So and I just found from doing research and making contacts and networking that there was a bit more to the stories. 74 is very much a reminiscing retrospective, whereas the other 2 are very much kind of troubled productions, which is something that is quite interesting to write about, especially the sort of access that we got in terms of what actually happened behind the scenes, which was really interesting.
Because you're working with Dave Hastings on this project, and you both have your names appear on the cover. And I mean, I know Dave's interest in horror goes back a long way, and so some of the classic horror as well. And this story itself, I mean, there is talk of it being born out of a true series of events in the 60s into the 70s.
Yeah, there was a series. Well, I say a series. I made a case, and I think it actually was in Canada, if I remember right, from the research. And it kind of bases itself around. I can't remember what the urban. It's basically, they almost call it an urban legend now, in terms of it's the man upstairs with the babysitter or something like that. And basically, it kind of reminisced. So it kind of almost riffed on what actually goes on in Black Christmas, in terms of there's harassing phone calls, and a young girl who was a babysitter was basically said that there's somebody in the house, and then by the time that the police got to her after she made the phone call, it was too late, and I think the killer had left some inscriptions on the wall, and I'm not sure if they ever found him. Which, in terms of Black Christmas, it kind of hits a lot of their marks. And again, looking a bit forward in terms of a few years later, obviously Halloween with the babysitter murders, basically. Similar themes in terms of like the kind of the genesis, what you'd probably say, of the slasher film. But that side of things was really interesting, because we were able to really go back and look at the old newspaper clippings and kind of reports and that. And talking to one of the uncredited screenwriters as well, he gave us an insight in terms of they used it as a kind of a very basic outline, but then they kind of adapted it into obviously what it became.
And itself, it was a profitable film. I mean, it would cost just over $600,000 to produce, and took more than $4 million at the box office. So it was a movie which was successful, and even the 2019 often panned reimagining still did reasonably well financially too. So yeah, the money's come back on all these projects, and I think that it's a story and a set of tales here which are striking fear into people's hearts, because it is the sadly realistic way that we've seen actual true life things happen here. And did that affect the actors that you were able to speak to when they were filming, knowing that these things can and have happened?
I don't think it was really leaned on too much, from what we can gather from the people that we spoke to, and looking back in terms of historical articles and interviews and everything else. It wasn't really alluded to very much. I mean, I suppose we have to really put it in that kind of time capsule, and the fact that it was 1974, the horror genre was in a very different place. You know, we're kind of just about post-Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but then obviously we haven't really got a lot of the classics, shall we say, that we already had that we got years later, shall we say, that are more renowned. It was very much a we're post-Psycho, but we're not really kind of into the Halloween groove, and it becoming a bit more mainstream. So I don't think it was alluded to too much, not from what I can gather. What was quite interesting, actually, in terms of like you mentioned about the real life aspect, was and I didn't know this until we started researching. For the 2006 remake, there was the writer director Glenn Morgan basically looked at the kind of the Black Christmas mythology, shall we say, and then he obviously reinterpreted it, and he based his kind of Billy backstory, shall we say, on I think the guy's name was Edward Kemper, who was an American serial killer, and he was featured quite heavily in the series Mindhunter that was on Netflix. And from watching that, in terms of there was a very and then obviously looking into the backstory and things like that, there's a lot of like close connections, shall we say, and it was quite interesting because there's three films, but they're three very different animals. And speaking to writers and in some cases directors and that, we got insights, and it's very weird because they're almost Black Christmas in name sometimes, and they're very different animals in other senses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, you spoke to a number of the people involved in that original production, and were there any names that stood out for you that you're really proud to have spoken to?
We managed to speak to a couple of people that didn't actually who hadn't been interviewed before. So the editor Stan Cole, the costume designer Karen Bromley, who hadn't really spoke about the film before, like really in detail, and they gave us reams and reams of information. We managed to get a couple of Skype calls in with one of the actors, Nick Mancuso. I think we went on to do a lot of genre films, and he did the voice, or one of the voices of Billy on the phone, which was quite interesting. And he did the voice during the Skype chat, which was very unnerving. And the camera operator as well, Albert J. Dunk, who we spoke to from Canada, he basically had the camera almost propped onto his head, and he was the one who was doing all the POV shots during the 74 film. So that was really fascinating in terms of for filmmaking geeks. It was a very fascinating insight.
Particularly because the way in which technology's moved on. I mean, you've talked about the slasher movie coming to its own after this. I mean, really, it was the 70s into the 80s as technology improved. The sort of size camera you'd have had to have put on your head at that point, unless it was a little 16mm thing, would have been absolutely massive. And it's a whole different world to where we live now, where you can actually put an 8K camera this sort of size into a character and never be visible on set.
Yeah, and it was almost like, I think he described it, it's almost like a harness he was wearing on his shoulders. So it almost like was like propped around his head and his shoulders. And obviously at times, there was only really a couple of scenes when he was climbing, but obviously it's very dangerous, and then obviously it's kind of it's independent filmmaking, I suppose. That's he who dares wins.
Well, you're exploring the background and giving an insight to the movie. It's almost as if you want to watch the movie, read the book, and then watch the movie again, so you can sort of marry up all the different moments.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly one thing that I found, which was quite strange, obviously, as we were going through and analysing the films, and I almost kind of divorced myself from the films after we'd finished writing it and kind of sent it over to the publishers. But now I feel like we've kind of exercise the demon, and I can kind of enjoy them again, because we were studying them so much in terms of commentaries, analysis, we're looking at frames and shots and everything else. So yeah, I can finally enjoy Black Christmas again.
In its own special slasher kind of a way, of course. If it doesn't make you feel uncomfortable, it's not working, is it?
No.
So where do we find the book? How can we get hold of a copy?
So it's available on Amazon. I think Amazon UK are stocking it. I think they've got limited copies. And you can also go to the publisher Bear Manor Media. They've got a Shopify site, and basically, I think it's based on the front page. But as we're speaking, I think it's actually on Valentine's Day, ironically. The paperback edition will also be available. So there's going to be a hardback and a paperback, and then I think down the line there's going to be an ebook version as well. So
that's something to come. So what is the full title, and I'm not going to go for ISBN number, but everything except the ISBN number, please.
Yeah, so it's Me, Billy, Black Christmas Revisited, and it's by Paul Downey, myself, and the co-author David Hastings. And yes, available from Bear Manor Media and Amazon UK.
Oh, Paul, great speaking to you. Thank you for joining us, and good luck with that. And interesting to see what the future projects come out of your love for the horror genre.
All right, thank you very much.